In the year 452, the Roman Empire stands on the brink of ruin. Northern Italy is ablaze as the unstoppable Huns sweep through, leaving entire cities in ashes. Thousands are forced to flee, abandoning everything in search of safety. In their desperation, they stumble upon a desolate lagoon, a scattering of muddy islands that seems like a last resort. But what begins as a mere sanctuary for survival will soon transform into a marvel of human ingenuity, giving rise to one of the greatest engineering triumphs the world has ever known: Venice. Despite having no roads, no land, and no fresh water, the Venetians managed to turn a muddy swamp into the most powerful and wealthiest city of its time. This unique layout of canals and bridges woven through hundreds of islands made Venice incredibly accessible, and it became the epicenter of all business. When the first refugees arrived to start their new lives on the islands, they had the worst possible surface to build on. The small, marshy islands were made of an incredibly soft clay that would barely hold the weight of a human, let alone an entire city. To create stable foundations for buildings, the Venetians collected large timber piles from the forests of Croatia and started hammering them into the ground. They drove them about 5 meters deep until they reached a much harder layer of clay. Not only did this stabilize the piles, but by packing them really close together, it compressed the surrounding clay, pushing out the water and making it much stronger. Once the piles were firmly in the ground, the tops were cut off, and wooden planks were laid on top to spread the load. Special blocks of Istrian stone were then placed to raise the foundations above the water. This design was a stroke of genius, as the wooden piles were sealed away from the air, making it impossible for them to rot. To this day, almost all of the original piles are in great condition and are still holding up the city. Once the foundation had been properly laid down, the buildings themselves were built. Venetians started off using wood for their houses, but after numerous fires, they switched to brick. To keep the buildings as lightweight as possible, they had to be no more than 3 stories high. Lime mortar had to be used instead of cement because it was flexible and allowed the entire building to flex as the ground beneath slowly moved. The inner walls were built in a crisscross pattern that would also flex like a trellis. The facade walls, which had large windows and elegant stone designs, were much heavier. To stop them from falling over, they were pinned into the floor using iron rods, keeping the entire building together. This method of building worked well for the Venetians, and soon several islands around the lagoon were established in this way. Instead of expanding outwards like most cities, these islands expanded into each other. At first, boats were the only way to cross between the islands, but eventually, the islands grew closer together, and many could be crossed by simply wading through the shallow water on a horse. The next step in Venice's evolution would, of course, be connecting the islands. Surprisingly, there were no bridges for the first 500 years of Venice's existence. As the population increased and business started to ramp up, there needed to be an easier way to reach Rialto, the financial center of Venice. The Doge of Venice set up a prize for the engineer who could design the best bridge. After several attempts, bridges began connecting the islands, transforming Venice into a bustling city with canals instead of roads. Despite being surrounded by water, Venice couldn't use any of it, since it was extremely salty and undrinkable. Without natural springs or rivers to collect fresh water, Venice relied on boats to deliver water from the mainland. With 170,000 people, the demand became too much, and Venetian engineers had to get creative. Squares were built to collect rainwater. By funneling rain from rooftops and filtering it through sand and stone, the Venetians ingeniously stored fresh water. In the 16th century, underground tunnels were built to collect waste and flush it into the canals, with the tides naturally cleaning the city twice a day. The motion of the tide coming in and out would exchange the dirty water for fresh water from the sea, flushing Venice of its waste. The extremely salty water worked as a strong disinfectant, and thanks to this system, the streets became clean. Amazingly, almost all of the incredible engineering that made Venice is still around today. The bridges, the canals, and the buildings are all ancient relics sitting on a foundation that has supported the city for over 1,000 years. That's all for today. So, if you've satisfied your curiosity, Give this video a like and share it with your friends. Or, if you want more, click on these videos and don't forget to subscribe the channel.